I wasn't supposed to be there. In fact, I never wanted to be there. But Rhea insisted. And when your wife, the love of your life, asks you to attend an office party you're not interested in, what else can you do? You see, my name is Jason. I'm not the kind of guy who's comfortable in social settings, especially not with strangers. I'm the guy who'd rather stay home, binge watch some obscure crime series, and have a quiet evening with my wife. But tonight, things were different. Come on, Jason. It'll be fun. You're always on your own. Let me show you how to have a good time, Rhea had said, her voice filled with excitement as she looked at me from the door, pulling on her sleek black dress. There was something in her eyes that made it impossible to say no. It wasn't the first time she'd asked me to go with her to one of these corporate shindigs, but for some reason, tonight felt different. Something felt off. Still, I went. Rhea was amazing at making people feel comfortable. She had that aura about her. Everyone loved her. She was smart, funny, and effortlessly beautiful in a way that didn't need to be flaunted. And that's why I was the quiet one, standing in the background, quietly observing the world from my own little corner. But that night, something caught my attention. Something I couldn't explain. We arrived at the venue, a sleek rooftop bar downtown, with a view that made the city look like something out of a movie. It was all glass and chrome, with an ultra-modern vibe. I immediately felt out of place. I looked around at the crowd, and it wasn't long before I saw him. I didn't know his name, but I recognized him immediately. He was tall, built in that effortlessly athletic way, the kind of guy who clearly worked out but didn't have to make it obvious. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, but what made him stand out wasn't his appearance. It was the way he moved. He was confident, but not in a bragging way. No, his confidence was quiet, almost predatory, as if he knew exactly how to control the room without saying a word. I watched him for a second longer than I intended, and that's when Rhea spotted me. "Jason, over here," she called, waving me over to a group of people she was talking to. I walked over and forced a smile, but something in me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The guy, who I'd now learned was named Finn, was in the middle of the group, talking to Rhea with a familiarity that made me uncomfortable. I hadn't realized at first, but it was the way he was standing too close, the way he looked at her when she laughed. I told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, Rhea had known these people for a while. Finn was just another one of her colleagues. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel this strange sense of unease, as if my wife, my Rhea, was slipping away from me in a way that was subtle, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. A few moments later, she turned to me. "Jason, this is Finn, from the project management team." She introduced him with that warm, genuine smile she always wore. But this time, it felt different. She said his name with too much emphasis, like she was trying to convince me that they were just friends. But the look in her eyes, there was something there, something I wasn't used to seeing. I extended my hand out to Finn, trying to mask the growing feeling of discomfort. "Nice to meet you," I said, trying to sound polite, but feeling the awkwardness between us settle like a thick fog. Finn smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Likewise, Jason. I've heard a lot about you." I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination, but the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. The room felt suddenly smaller, and I found myself holding my breath as I tried to focus on the conversation. "Rhea was just telling me about your work with the tech team. Sounds like you've been busy lately," Finn said, leaning in slightly, his eyes never quite leaving mine. "Yeah, it's been hectic," I muttered, feeling my chest tighten. What was he doing? Why did it feel like he was inspecting me, sizing me up? But Rhea jumped in before I could react further. "Jason is always busy with something. He's one of those workaholics," she laughed, a little too brightly. But it wasn't the kind of laugh that made me feel better. It felt forced. And just like that, Finn stepped back, but not before giving me one last lingering look. It was the kind of look that made my skin crawl. It wasn't rude, not in the traditional sense. But it was a look that carried weight, a silent message that made my heart race faster than it should have. I told myself to relax. There was nothing going on, nothing for me to worry about. But the knot in my stomach was there, growing tighter with every passing minute. I had always trusted Rhea. I loved her. But tonight felt like it was the beginning of something I couldn't control. And I had no idea how far it would go. The evening dragged on. Despite the glitzy atmosphere, the clinking of glasses, and the lively chatter around me, I felt more and more disconnected. The buzz of the party seemed distant as I tried to focus on my surroundings, but my mind kept returning to Finn, to the way he stood a little too close to Rhea, the way his laughter lingered a second too long when she said something funny. As the night went on, I found myself more withdrawn. Rhea, as always, was in her element. She was effortlessly charming, moving through conversations with ease, laughing, smiling, making everyone feel seen. I had always admired that about her. But tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just socializing for the sake of it. There was a certain energy between her and Finn, an unspoken connection that I couldn't ignore. At some point, Rhea wandered off to speak with a few more colleagues. I found myself standing by the edge of the balcony, nursing my drink, staring out at the city below. The lights from the skyscrapers painted the streets in hues of gold and silver, and for a moment, I thought about how nice it would be to just go home, away from the tension in the air. But then, as if on cue, I saw him again. Finn. He was leaning casually against the railing, talking to another group of people, but his gaze kept drifting back to Rhea. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see the way his eyes followed her every movement. It was almost predatory, like he was waiting for the right moment, the perfect opportunity to swoop in and claim what was his. I tried to look away. I really did. But there was something magnetic about his presence, something that drew my attention despite my best efforts. I could feel the pit in my stomach grow, that uneasy feeling tightening with every passing second. And then, as if sensing my discomfort, Finn turned his head and locked eyes with me. The brief moment of eye contact felt like a silent challenge, one that sent a ripple of unease through my chest. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. There was an edge to it, something that made me question his intentions. He wasn't just looking at me. He was sizing me up, as if to assess how much of a threat I might be. It was subtle, but I couldn't ignore it. My heart raced as I quickly turned away, feeling a flush of heat creep up my neck. What was going on? Why was I reacting like this? Was I just being paranoid? I tried to focus on the crowd, on the people around me, but all I could think about was Finn and Rhea. And then, as if fate had conspired to push me further into this spiral of doubt, I saw them again. Rhea and Finn. They were standing together by the bar now, their bodies angled toward each other as they spoke. Finn was leaning in just a little too close, his hand resting casually on the counter between them. Rhea was laughing, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. Something that wasn't for me. I tried to tell myself that I was overreacting, that it was just harmless conversation. But the way Finn's hand brushed against hers when she reached for her drink, the way their faces seemed to inch closer with each passing second, it all felt too intimate. I could feel my pulse quicken. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more paranoid than the last. Was there something between them? Something I didn't know about? Something I didn't want to know? The thought made my stomach churn. I had always trusted Rhea. Always. We had built a life together, shared everything. Our hopes, our dreams, our fears. But tonight, that trust was slipping through my fingers, as fragile as glass. The night felt like it was stretching on forever, each minute dragging by with the weight of 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that this was just another office gathering. Something had shifted, and I could feel it deep in my gut. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, it happened. Rhea's laughter broke through the noise of the party, but this time, it sounded different. It wasn't the light-hearted sound I was used to. It was something darker, something that made my blood run cold. I turned toward her, my heart pounding in my chest, only to see her looking at Finn in a way I had never seen before. Her gaze wasn't just playful, it was hungry. The way she looked at him sent a jolt of panic through me, a feeling I had never experienced in our relationship. It wasn't just admiration. It wasn't just fondness. It was something deeper, something that made me question everything I thought I knew about her. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This couldn't be happening. My mind screamed at me to stop thinking like this, to trust my wife, to believe in the love we shared. But no matter how hard I tried to push the thoughts away, they only got stronger. I was trapped in a whirlwind of uncertainty. How had I not seen this before? How had I missed the signs? I felt a burning desire to confront her, to demand the truth. But I couldn't. I didn't want to be the jealous, insecure husband who couldn't trust his wife. But the more I watched, the more I realized that I might be the only one who wasn't seeing the truth. As the night went on, I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her. Slowly, steadily, I was losing her to someone else. And I didn't know how to stop it. The music was too loud. The chatter was too much. The air was thick with the mingling scents of expensive cologne and champagne, but none of it seemed to matter. My mind was racing, caught in a storm of doubt and suspicion that I couldn't escape. I couldn't stop thinking about Rhea and Finn, about the way they had looked at each other earlier, the way she laughed, the way he seemed to absorb her attention like he was soaking up sunlight. It was silly, I told myself. I was being paranoid. Finn was just another coworker, and Rhea was just being friendly, right? She was always the life of the party, always the center of attention. But something about the way Finn seemed to orbit her, like he had a gravitational pull all his own, felt different. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and I hated to admit it, but I could see that he wanted her. I was standing at the bar now, pretending to sip my drink, but my hand was shaking. I wanted to ask Rhea what was going on, to demand some kind of explanation, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What if I was wrong? What if I was just making something out of nothing? I didn't want to seem like a jealous fool, but the truth was, I was terrified. What if I was losing her? I looked across the room again, hoping to catch a glimpse of them. There they were, Rhea and Finn, talking again, but this time they were alone. She was leaning in close, so close that I could see the way her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. Finn, on the other hand, had that same smirk on his face, that smile that seemed to say he knew something I didn't. He was leaning in just a little too much, a little too comfortable in his proximity to her. I tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on something else, but I couldn't. It was like I was stuck in a loop, a never-ending cycle of insecurity and doubt. And then, for the first time that evening, I saw Rhea glance up at me. Her eyes met mine across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. She smiled that smile, the one she always reserved for me, and I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that I was just imagining things. But there was something in her eyes, something that made me feel like she wasn't seeing me at all. That was the moment it hit me. Rhea wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. Something had changed. And the worst part? I didn't know how or when it had happened. It was like a slow erosion, a gradual shift that I hadn't been able to see because I had been too busy trusting her, too busy convincing myself that everything was fine. But now it was painfully clear. My thoughts were interrupted when Rhea suddenly made her way over to me, her smile bright as she approached. "Jason, are you having a good time?" she asked, her voice too cheerful, too forced. I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil swirling inside me. "Yeah, it's fine," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the usual warmth. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close and tell her what I was feeling, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself staring at her, trying to read her expression, trying to figure out what she was thinking. She didn't seem to notice the distance that had suddenly grown between us. "You should meet some more people. Come on," she urged, already pulling me toward a new group of coworkers. But as she led me away, I couldn't shake the image of Finn, still standing by the bar, watching us with that same unnerving intensity. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I barely registered the faces or the conversations around me. All I could think about was Rhea and Finn, the way they looked at each other, the way they seemed to share some unspoken bond that I wasn't part of. The jealousy burned in my chest, a cold, gnawing feeling that wouldn't let go. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom, desperate for a moment of solitude. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, my face pale and drawn. I looked like a man who had aged 10 years in one night. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to shake off the tension in my body, but it wouldn't go away. I was in too deep now. My mind was consumed by the thought that something was happening between Rhea and Finn. I wasn't sure what it was, but it didn't matter. The fact that I couldn't explain it made it worse. The unknown was always the scariest part, the part that made your heart race and your palms sweat. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I couldn't let this consume me. I needed to be rational, to think this through. Maybe I was being ridiculous. Maybe it was all in my head. But what if it wasn't? What if there was something more to it? I had to know. With that thought, I made my decision. I wasn't going to wait around, pretending everything was fine. I had to confront them. I couldn't keep lying to myself. I walked back into the party, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no turning back now. The moment I stepped into the crowd again, I saw her, Rhea, laughing with Finn, their faces close together. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. And in that moment, I knew this night would be the turning point, the moment everything changed. I don't remember how I got to the spot where Rhea and Finn were talking. It was like my body had moved on its own, propelled by the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My heart was hammering in my chest, each beat louder than the music playing in the background. The world felt strangely muted, as if everything around me was happening in slow motion. There they were, Rhea, standing so close to Finn that their shoulders almost brushed with each laugh they shared. I had seen this before, countless times, in movies and TV shows. The way people looked at each other when they weren't supposed to be looking at each other that way. The way their smiles lingered just a second too long. It was a look that was familiar to me, but it wasn't my look. It wasn't the way she looked at me anymore. And that was the problem. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear her away from him, to demand an explanation for everything I'd seen tonight. But instead, I stood there, paralyzed. It was almost like I had to watch this unfold, like I was caught in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Finn caught my eye first. His expression didn't change when he saw me, but there was a slight shift in his posture, a subtle acknowledgement of my presence. And that was the moment that broke me. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew the game he was playing, and the worst part was, he was winning. Rhea turned her head, finally noticing I was standing there. For a split second, there was a flicker of guilt in her eyes, just a flicker, but it was there. It was like she'd been caught in the act. But then she covered it up with that practiced smile of hers, the one that had always made people fall in love with her. "Jason," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced. "I was just telling Finn about that project we're working on. You know, the one we've been struggling with." I didn't respond at first. I just stood there, feeling like I was suffocating in the tightness of the moment. I could feel the anger welling up inside me, but I couldn't quite channel it into words. Instead, I looked at Finn, really looked at him this time. There was no trace of apology or guilt in his eyes, just that calm, unsettling confidence. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. "Yeah, I've heard a lot about that," Finn said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. His smile was all teeth, like a predator sizing up its prey. "It's a tough one, right?" I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to punch him in the face and drag him away from my wife. But something in me knew that wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't make the hurt go away. Instead, it would only make everything worse. So I did the one thing I wasn't sure I could do. I looked at Rhea. "Is this how it's going to be?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. My heart was pounding in my throat, but I couldn't stop. The words spilled out before I could stop them. "Is this what's been happening? Is this what's been going on behind my back?" Rhea's smile faltered for a moment, just a moment, before she masked it with a quick laugh. "What are you talking about, Jason?" She reached for my arm, as if to steady me, but it felt wrong. It felt forced. "You're overthinking this. Finn and I are just friends. Just talking about work. You know how these things go." But I could see it in her eyes. I could hear the lie in her voice. I wasn't stupid. I had known something was off, and now the truth was staring me in the face. Finn wasn't just a coworker. He wasn't just some guy at a party. He was something more. I didn't need her to say anything else. The way she looked at him, the way they were standing so close, the way she touched his arm as she spoke. These weren't the actions of two people who were just colleagues. This was something else, something I wasn't prepared for. I felt my hands ball into fists, the anger rising like a wave in my chest. I wanted to confront her, to demand that she tell me the truth. But I didn't know what the truth was anymore. I didn't know if I could trust her words, if I could trust anything she said. "Jason, stop," Rhea said, her voice turning cold now. She stepped closer to me, and for the first time that evening, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't warmth. It wasn't love. It was irritation. "You're being dramatic. This is nothing. You're imagining things. I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this. Finn and I are just working together. That's all." Her words hit me like a slap to the face, but it wasn't the words themselves that hurt. It was the way she said them, the way she dismissed me as if I was nothing more than a nuisance. She was lying to me, and deep down, I knew it. The doubt that had been slowly eating away at me all night was now a gaping wound, impossible to ignore. Finn's smile widened. like he could sense the tension between us. He took a step back, his posture relaxed, as if he were watching a show he was enjoying. And maybe he was. Maybe this was all a game to him. But it wasn't a game to me. This was my life, my marriage, my trust. And in that moment, I realized something. The Rhea I had known, the Rhea I had loved, was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I turned away from them then, my chest tight with emotion, and I walked out of the party. I didn't care that I was leaving. I didn't care that Rhea was calling after me, asking me to come back, to listen to her side of the story. I had heard enough. The truth was too clear now. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized one terrifying thing. This wasn't the end of it. This was only the beginning. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped out of the building. I didn't know where I was going, but my legs carried me forward, away from the noise, away from the chaos of the party. The city lights blurred in my vision, and for a brief moment, I thought about just walking until my feet gave out. I wanted to escape, to get as far away as I could from the painful reality that had just unfolded. I could hear Rhea calling after me, her voice distant, fading as I put more distance between us. Jason, please. Come back. We need to talk. This isn't what you think. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't face her right now. Not when everything I thought I knew about our relationship was falling apart in front of me. I couldn't deal with the lies, with the manipulations, with the crushing weight of betrayal. I kept walking, the pavement beneath my feet becoming a steady rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of everything, but it was impossible. The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit. Rhea had always been so trustworthy, so loving. But now, all of that felt like a lie, like a carefully crafted illusion that I had believed in without question. How long had it been going on? Was I just blind to it all? I didn't know how much time passed before I found myself standing outside our apartment building, staring up at the windows. It felt wrong, being here, but it also felt like the only place I could go. The only place I could hide from the chaos of my own mind. I could feel the tension building inside me, the anger and sadness swirling together, mixing into something that felt dangerous. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by walking away from this. I took a deep breath and walked through the front door. The apartment was quiet when I entered, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound that greeted me. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It was all too still, too peaceful, and it felt wrong, knowing what I had just experienced, knowing what I had just witnessed. I moved toward the living room, my eyes scanning the space as if I could find some clue, some sign that things weren't as they seemed. But the room was empty, just as I had left it. I walked toward the couch, sinking down onto it with a heavy sigh. My mind was spinning, racing with 1,000 different scenarios, none of which made any sense. And then, just as I was beginning to drown in my own thoughts, the door opened. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Rhea. I could hear the soft click of her heels on the floor as she entered, the hesitant steps that told me she wasn't sure what to say, how to fix what had just happened. She stopped behind me, her breath catching as she tried to find the right words. "Jason, please," she said softly, her voice trembling. I could hear the guilt in her tone, but it wasn't enough to make me feel better. It wasn't enough to erase the image of her and Finn, standing so close together, their eyes locked in that way I had never seen before. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. What was there to say? What could she say to make this better? She walked over and sat beside me, but I didn't move. I kept my gaze fixed ahead, my jaw clenched tight as the silence between us stretched longer. "I never meant for this to happen," Rhea said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't like that, Jason. Finn and we've been working together on a project, but that's all it is. You're the one I love. You're the one I'm committed to." The words felt empty, hollow. I wanted to believe her, but everything I had seen, everything I had felt, told me otherwise. Her presence beside me felt distant, like a stranger sitting in my home. "How long, Rhea?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I finally turned to look at her, my eyes searching hers for any hint of honesty. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been hiding this from me?" She flinched at my words, her eyes welling with tears. But I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. "Not yet. It hasn't been like you think," she said, her voice shaky. "There's nothing going on between Finn and me. I promise. You have to believe me." But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. The truth was there, plain as day, staring me in the face. She had been lying to me, hiding something. Maybe not a full-blown affair, but something that was far worse than I had ever imagined. The emotional connection, the intimacy that was growing between her and Finn, it was all there, and I had seen it with my own eyes. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice finally rising in frustration. "I saw it. I saw the way you were looking at him, the way you were standing with him. You don't just laugh like that with a coworker, Rhea. You don't touch someone like that unless there's something more." Her lips trembled as she reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away before she could make contact. I wasn't ready for her touch. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. "I swear to you, Jason," she said, her voice breaking. "There's nothing going on. Please, just let me explain." But I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want her words anymore. I needed the truth, and I had already seen enough. My heart ached in a way I had never felt before, and I couldn't decide whether to stay or walk out the door for good. Everything had changed in one night. And what hurt the most wasn't what I had seen. It was the fact that I had trusted her so completely, and she had shattered that trust in the blink of an eye. I took a deep breath and stood up, my hands shaking as I walked toward the door. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Rhea," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I need space. I need to think. I can't be here right now." And with that, I walked out of the apartment, leaving her behind in the silence of her lies. The cold night air hit me as I stepped out into the street, the city lights flickering like distant stars. The familiar hum of the traffic and the occasional pedestrian passing by felt hollow, almost surreal. It was as though the world had continued turning without me, leaving me standing still in the middle of it all. My legs moved automatically, carrying me farther from the apartment, farther from Rhea, from the life I thought I knew. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I needed to get away. The suffocating weight of the conversation, the look in her eyes, the desperation in her voice, it all made me feel like I was drowning. Every breath felt like it was being pulled from me by invisible hands. I found myself walking aimlessly through the streets, my thoughts constantly circling back to that moment. Rhea's face, her pleading eyes, the way she begged me to listen, to understand. But I couldn't. I couldn't understand how everything had shifted so quickly. One moment, I had been standing there, thinking I had the perfect life, and the next, I was questioning everything. I tried to force the image of her with Finn from my mind, but it kept coming back. The way they stood together, the closeness that wasn't just physical but emotional, the way she had laughed and touched him like she had forgotten I was even in the room. It all felt like a betrayal. No, worse than a betrayal. It felt like a part of her, a part of the love we had built together, had been stolen away from me without warning. I stopped in front of a small park, the dim light from a nearby street lamp casting long shadows across the ground. The air was cool, and I could hear the rustling of leaves in the wind, but it was silent in my head. All the noise, the party, Rhea's voice, the anger, the hurt, had been replaced with a deafening quiet. I sat down on a bench, trying to steady my breathing, trying to make sense of the mess inside me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was no easy answer. There were no simple solutions. It wasn't just about Finn or about that moment at the party. It was about everything. The trust one had placed in Rhea, the life we had built, the promises we had made to each other. And now, all of it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I could feel the tears threatening to rise, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't ready to cry yet. I wasn't ready to break down. Not when I still didn't know the full story. Not when I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out instinctively. It was a message from Rhea. My finger hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to read it. I knew what it would say. She would apologize, promise that she had done nothing wrong, beg me to come home, to talk, to give her a chance to explain. But I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear her explanations when I already knew the truth, at least, the truth as I saw it. I turned the phone off, stuffing it back into my pocket. I needed space. I needed time. But time was the one thing I wasn't sure I had. The clock was ticking, and every second that passed only deepened the sense of dread that hung over me. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Rhea and I would make it through this, or if I'd ever be able to trust her again. But I did know one thing. I couldn't go back to that apartment. Not yet. I needed to think, to clear my head, to figure out if I could even look at her the same way again. As I sat there, the cold air cutting through my jacket. I found myself wishing for something simpler, something I could hold on to. Because right now, everything I had believed in felt like it was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. Hours passed, but I stayed in that park, trying to make sense of everything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rhea's face, her smile, her laughter with Finn, and the weight of the decision I had to make settled deeper into my chest. Should I go back to her? Should I confront her again? Or was it time to walk away for good? The questions tormented me, but there were no easy answers. I had trusted her. I had loved her. But trust was something that had been broken, and love had become something that felt uncertain, something I wasn't sure I could rely on anymore. I got up from the bench, my legs stiff from sitting too long, and started walking again. My mind was still racing, but at least my body was moving, putting one foot in front of the other, as if going through the motions would eventually lead me to some kind of resolution. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. Nothing was ever that easy. The sun was just starting to rise as I wandered through the streets. The faint light of dawn mixed with the lingering shadows, and for a moment, everything felt suspended between night and day, between what had been and what might come. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't stay in that park forever. I couldn't keep running from the truth. Eventually, I made my way back toward our apartment, but as I approached, I saw the silhouette of Rhea standing outside. She was waiting for me, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlight. She had been standing there for who knows how long, hoping I'd come back. I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what to do. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at her. She didn't speak, didn't move. It was like she was waiting for me to make the next move, to decide if we could salvage what was left of our relationship. But as I stood there, I realized something. I wasn't ready to make a decision yet. I wasn't ready to forgive her or confront her again. I needed more time. And that's when I knew this wasn't the end of it. This was just the beginning of something much darker, something I wasn't sure I could control. But whatever came next, I couldn't face it alone. I stood there, motionless, watching Rhea as she waited in the dim light. The early morning glow cast long shadows on the street, but there was nothing comforting about it. The silence between us felt thick, almost suffocating. My body wanted to move, to walk away again, but I couldn't. I couldn't just keep running. Not now. I needed answers, even if they were painful. I needed to understand what had happened, what had changed, what had broken between us. Rhea hadn't moved, hadn't said a word since I had seen her standing there. Her figure was framed by the faint light, but her face was hidden in shadow. I couldn't tell if she was waiting for me to say something first, or if she was simply preparing herself for what she knew was coming. Maybe both. "Jason," she finally said, her voice shaky, her words hanging in the air between us. It wasn't the same voice from the party, full of false reassurance and practiced smiles. No, this voice was different, soft, vulnerable, almost as if she, too, was trying to hold on to whatever shred of hope there was left between us. But I didn't know if there was hope anymore. I took a deep breath, my chest tight with the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. I had spent the entire night walking the streets, trying to make sense of it all, but the more I thought, the more I realized that I had no answers. I needed to know the truth, whatever that truth was. I couldn't keep living in this haze of uncertainty. I stepped closer to her, but still, I couldn't bring myself to close the distance completely. It was as though something invisible was holding me back, pulling me into a place of cold detachment. "What do you want from me, Rhea?" I asked, my voice low, steady, but heavy with emotion. "Why did you do this? Why did you let it go this far?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering her thoughts. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke again. "I don't know," she whispered. "I honestly don't know when it started. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did." Her words hung in the air like a confession, and I felt an immediate rush of anger and disbelief. "It wasn't supposed to happen? Rhea, how can you even say that? You've been lying to me, hiding things from me for who knows how long, and now you're telling me it wasn't supposed to happen?" She flinched, as if my words had physically struck her, but I didn't care. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to what I thought we had, trying to believe that we were strong, that we were unbreakable. But now, it was all crumbling apart in front of me, and I wasn't sure I could ever put the pieces back together. "Jason, please," she said, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. But she stopped, as if she couldn't find the right words, as if she had reached the point where even her own explanations couldn't cover up the damage that had already been done. But it was too late for apologies. It was too late for explanations that weren't rooted in truth. But you did, Rhea. You hurt me, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay composed. You've been pushing me away for God knows how long, and now I see it all. Everything I didn't want to see, everything I didn't want to admit. You've been changing, and I didn't even notice. Her face crumpled slightly, her hand instinctively reaching out to me, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt wider than ever before, and I couldn't bridge that gap. Not yet. I didn't want you to notice, she said softly, her words like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I wanted to keep everything normal, keep it all the way it was. But then I met Finn, and I don't know what happened. It was a slow thing, Jason. It wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something I thought I was capable of. I wanted to tell her that I understood, that sometimes people made mistakes, that everyone had their flaws. But I couldn't. I couldn't forgive her yet, not when the betrayal was so raw, so fresh. Not when I still felt the sharp sting of it every time I thought about it. You met him, and now everything has changed, I said, my voice hollow. I saw the way you looked at him, Rhea. The way you two were together. You can't tell me that was just a mistake, not when I saw it with my own eyes. There's something between you and him, and I can't just ignore it anymore. I can't pretend that it's nothing. Rhea's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost softened. But then I remembered the way she had brushed me off the night before, the way she had acted like nothing was wrong. And I realized that no matter how much she cried, no matter how sorry she seemed, I couldn't just forget. I couldn't just let her off the hook because she was sorry. I don't know what to do, Jason, she whispered. I really don't. I never meant for it to get this far. But you're right, I was changing. I let myself get too close to Finn, and now everything's a mess. But it wasn't an affair. It wasn't like that. I swear to you it wasn't. But I understand if you don't believe me. I understand if you hate me now. The finality in her voice stung more than I cared to admit. It was the truth. She had betrayed me, and now she was preparing herself for the consequences, whatever they may be. But that wasn't enough for me. Not yet. I needed time. I needed to figure out if I could trust her again, if I could even be the person she wanted me to be in this broken relationship. I don't know what I believe anymore, Rhea, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I need space. I need time to think, to figure out if I can ever trust you again. Because right now, I can't even look at you the same way. And I'm not sure I ever will. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the street, her silhouette barely visible in the early morning light. The weight of everything hung on me like an anchor, pulling me down into a place I wasn't sure I could come back from. But as I walked away, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, I couldn't do it alone. The trust had been shattered, and the future I had once believed and felt like it was slipping further out of my reach. And there was no telling if I would ever find it again. The days that followed felt like a blur. I stayed in a small hotel for a few nights, unsure of where to go, what to do, or even how to feel. Rhea's messages and calls became constant, but I ignored most of them. I needed the silence, the space to think, to process. I wasn't sure what was worse, the betrayal itself, or the fact that I had ignored all the subtle signs. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed things changing. It was that I had hoped so desperately that it was nothing. But it had become something I couldn't ignore anymore. I spent a lot of time walking, aimlessly mostly. It helped to get out of my head, to just breathe and not think about the past or the future for a while. But no matter how far I walked, no matter how many thoughts I tried to shut out, the truth kept creeping back in. I still loved her. I still loved Rhea, despite everything. It was the hardest thing to admit to myself, but it was true. Love wasn't simple, and it wasn't easy, but it was there, deep inside me, a quiet but unwavering truth. After a few days, I finally decided to return. I wasn't ready for a confrontation, and I wasn't expecting an easy fix, but I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I couldn't keep pretending that I could escape what was broken. When I arrived back at the apartment, Rhea was sitting on the couch, her face pale, eyes tired from lack of sleep. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't say anything at first. Neither did she. The weight of everything was still there, unsaid, unspoken, but there was a softness now, a shared understanding that we were both in this mess together. "I'm sorry, Jason," she said, her voice trembling. "I was selfish. I lied to you. I broke your trust, and I can never take that back. But I want to try. I want to fix this." Her words were simple, but they held a depth I hadn't expected. I had thought about what I would say when I saw her again, the things I wanted to say in anger or in pain. But now, all I could do was nod, taking a hesitant step closer. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a willingness to listen, to hear her out, and see if there was anything left worth saving. "I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did," I said quietly, "but I'm willing to try. I don't want to give up on us, Rhea. I need to know that I can trust you again, and I need you to show me that you're willing to do the work too." Rhea's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded, a silent promise to do whatever it took. The next few weeks weren't easy. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, and every day felt like walking on a tightrope. But we were trying. Rhea made every effort to be open, to communicate more, and slowly, I began to feel like maybe we could find our way back to each other. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, moments where I felt the weight of everything that had happened. But there was also hope, a hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. We went to therapy together, something we had never considered before, but it helped. We talked about our fears, our mistakes, and our expectations. There were no quick fixes, no magic words that could erase the hurt. But slowly, the cracks began to heal. We found new ways to connect, new ways to remind each other that we weren't giving up. Not on each other, not on the love we had once shared. It was a long road, one that I wasn't sure where it would lead. But one thing became clear. The love we had was worth fighting for. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real, and that was enough. We started over, not as the same people we were before, but as two people who had faced the hardest test of their lives and come out the other side. Wounded, yes, but still together. There would always be a scar, but maybe that was a part of healing, too. And as I looked at Rhea, really looked at her for the first time in a long time, I realized that love wasn't just about perfection. It was about choosing to fight for something real, even when it seemed impossible. And that was exactly what I was doing. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it, with her by my side.